Welcome everyone. Here we are with some amazing parents for our panel, chatting with different parents of children with disabilities in celebration of the book coming out, Sexuality for All Abilities, Teaching and Discussing Sexual Health in Special Education. So excited.
My name's Bianca. I have one son. Well, I have two children. My daughter is 22 and my son is 17. He's high functioning autistic. He does struggle academically, so he's not necessarily Asperger's, but still kind of higher functioning socially on the autism spectrum. And he was diagnosed at about 5 years old. Because he's higher functioning, I have always pretty much communicated pretty direct with him. It's been kind of a, like, let's push you till you fall and then help you get up and see if I pushed you too hard, sort of parenting style, if I had to name it something. And so that's how we approach the subject of sexuality.
Okay, I have a 19-year-old son. He's an only child, and he's socially very high functioning. He has cognitive disabilities. He has a processing difficulty with language and reading in particular. So he's academically behind, extremely gregarious and outgoing. And as a mother, I have difficulty discussing sexuality with him. I'm always trying to get a man to do it, but haven't been successful. And I've just been, stumped by what's appropriate. When can he be independent in that area? Will I always be obviously I have to oversee, but how can he be an agent in his life that way?
I have a son, Aiden. He just turned 26. He has Down syndrome. And before I had Aiden, I had placed a baby for adoption. And that really kind of formed my reaction to having a child born with special needs, because Aiden wasn't going anywhere. Aiden was my son, and Aiden was going to stay with me forever. He works, well, not right now. He works at a small restaurant in St. Paul, and he's a busser and host and lives a very full life. He takes a regular bus, a light rail, another regular bus to get to work. So he has had a lot of determination in his life. He is not only a very driven young man, but I'm also kind of a risk taker. So I let him explore and fail and succeed like we all do. And he's the love of my life. Well, one of them. I do have another, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I am the mother to 3 boys. My oldest son is 14, and he has a condition called Angelman Syndrome. And so Angelman Syndrome is kind of in the category of profound intellectual and developmental disabilities. He's nonverbal. He has intense sensory processing disorders, needs supervision all of the time, except when sleeping, and even when sleeping needs to be in a safe room for himself. So he has very little privacy, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about sexuality. But so that is my oldest son. And then I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. So just thinking about sexuality education with all 3 of those as they get older. I also have experience as a sexuality educator. So I do come to this conversation with that background too. For about 10 years, I did formal sexuality education, and now I'm informally, all my friends experts. So, with their children anyway, they like to, say, oh, go talk to Kim. If you have questions, go ask Kim.
So thinking about some topics some sexuality education topics that maybe have been difficult for you to talk about with your child or with all of your children.
As I've thought about this question, I think that there's really 2 main areas that have been difficult to talk about. One would actually be masturbation, and actually what to expect from that, and like how to keep that clean. It's a conversation that it's very difficult for me to say, okay, so if something becomes messy, then let's clean it up, because direct instruction is so important. The other area is really like the details about sex. There's so much information out there that is just wrong about being a sexual being. And because of that, I think I worry that he has the wrong ideas around what actually having sexual intercourse is supposed to be like. So those two topics are really hard.
So I feel like because I had already, had a child before, and as I said, I just kind of had this way that I had decided I was going to do it, and we were just going to kind of wing it. But it was more or less my mantra is, if we always talk about it, it's never awkward to talk about it.
Wow.
So we always talked about sexuality. We always, age appropriate, of course, but it's always been a subject because I'd never wanted to create that space where, oh my God, now we're about to talk about something we've never spoken about before. So Javon has, he definitely has a comfort level with coming to me about body things, things that go on with his body. And when we started the age of masturbation, it was something that, I kind of walked in on, and I didn't know what to do. And I called the social worker or the teacher at the school or something. And I was like, okay, this is not my territory. And I talked to my brothers. I'm lucky enough to be the only girl, and I have 3 brothers. And they said, just tell them to lock the door. I said, so you mean it's not like this whole long drawn out thing? They were like, no, you're going to embarrass him. Tell him to lock the door and make sure he cleans up behind himself. And so we did. And he has a very clear understanding of that piece, and that it's very important to keep that private. It's something you do privately. I will say I am still currently in the middle of struggling talking about him being sexual with someone else. We communicate a lot through humor, and that's kind of how our household runs. And so we'll joke about certain things like getting a girlfriend, that sort of thing. But I am still struggling with the more serious conversation of him with a girlfriend, because he's the average teenager in that way where he really just doesn't want to have that conversation with his mom. We were in the car, and me, him, and my daughter, and he said, Mom, it's itching. And I said, well, you need to wash it. I said, and when I say wash it, I don't mean touch it. You need to actually wash it. And my daughter cringes, and she's like, oh, that's so disgusting. I can't even believe you said that out loud. And he says, what? Mom said I can touch it as long as I lock the door. And she says, well, of course you can touch it, but you're not supposed to talk about it. And now I'm mortified because I had never had a masturbation conversation with her. So now I have a reality that she's touching it. So there's several layers happening here.
Oh.
And I say, yep, it's fine that he touches it if he's behind the locked door, as long as nobody else touches it. And he said, well, I do hope a girl wants to touch it one day. And I had no clue where to go from there.
Yeah, one of my big questions is, if he's ready, when is it appropriate for him to engage in it? I mean, it's never appropriate as far as a parent is concerned, right? But somehow it happens. That's what I believe, right? I don't think most parents say, okay, you can now do that. I think somehow it happens and they give the guidelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with our children, or at least my son is not socially free to be without me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because he can do an Uber on his own, but the girls whom he would be out with, their parents would also be with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it would have to be something almost orchestrated or agreed to by the parents of both parties.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really hard. There's no way and I'm very sad for him in a way, because it could be happening normally later on and perhaps be okay if we weren't involved. But the fact is, 2 sets of families are going to have to be involved. And like, I have not discussed with him the sexual act.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's hard to talk about.
Yeah,
as a parent.
I've tried. I've shown him videos. I've directed him to go and look at videos.
Yeah.
I know I have not.
Yeah, I think
and he doesn't want to talk about me with it. So
Right.
when I mention it, like try and have an entree, he'll be like, oh yeah, I know. He says, or no, mom, or he'll brush me off.
Before I had children, and I did a lot of sexuality education with children, with parents, with teenagers, it was really easy to just talk about it and train on it. And it's very different in your own home. And I do have a lot of comfort talking about most topics of sexuality in an age appropriate way with my two younger boys. And I feel like I'm working through the books and the conversations as appropriate. And I kind of get excited talking about it because I do just love this work. But with my older son, I think what's been surprising for me, and I mean, this is a really intimate thing I'm sharing here, but I think everyone on here gets this. We've already talked a lot about masturbation, and it's really that because of his disability, I really have to be up close and personal with him at all times. And he uses the toilet, but he needs assistance using the toilet. So I've been shocked at how much I dislike the fact that I have to physically be maybe holding down an erect penis while he's peeing, right? These are things that you're kind of like, this is not what I thought I'd have to do as a parent. And so, for other parents listening to this, I'm with you in that is really hard and it's unexpected. Or if you're the mom who's changing pads or tampons or trying to make those decisions, that's really hard, and it's not something we expected to have to face with our teenagers when we became parents. So, we can't give our son a lot of privacy because of his disability. He will hurt himself by swallowing something inedible or, banging a window too hard. He does get some private time, and we are learning to coach him just with some words to say, well, it's your private time. You can touch your penis now, because he clearly wants to, and he's a teenager and he has the same urges as other teenagers, but he cannot figure out how to masturbate on his own. He does not know how to finish the job. And he's young enough that we're just letting it rest for a while, but we wrestle with this. And even with my comfort around all these topics, to what degree do we get involved in coaching our son on how to finish masturbating so he has some satisfaction around it? Because I think he's frustrated, but he is nonverbal and his other communication skills are very, very low. He has a great rapport with us, and we laugh and play and all sorts of wonderful things with him. And we can really see how he feels and his love for his family and everything, but he cannot express to us frustrations around his penis or his hormones or anything like that. And that will be what it's like forever. So masturbation will be probably the only way he has sexual satisfaction. So I really, for his sake, want him to know how to figure this out. So I need another sexpert to tell me to what degree do we help our kid figure out how to masturbate.
Mm-hmm. And I think those people are out there. I think there are people, and it's finding those other parents that have gone through this before you, have paved the way, and finding the other experts out there that know more about this. But yeah, it's constantly this learning thing. I also think that he's probably not unique in that. I mean, I think, I think that there's a lot of people as they're going through puberty and learning about their bodies that don't quite know how to do that either. And so it's definitely, it's a learning process for sure. When we think about sexuality and relationships, there's so much more to romantic relationships than sex and mutual masturbation, or people with disabilities that I have worked with who have had many romantic relationships that maybe didn't have sex, maybe didn't even touch each other's private body parts, but there was companionship, there was love. And it's pretty amazing to see that. What are topics that are easy for people to chat about?
The topics, I think, are the expected touch and the unexpected touch, and kind of the safety issues around that, like what is friendly and what is unfriendly, what is healthy and unhealthy. That super easy with those boundaries. Also, an easy topic for my son, Aiden really did understand private space, and I think it's super important that they understand that point of where nobody can see you and nobody can hear you. So those, and typically within your home, but still, if in your home if other people can see you or hear you?
So for me, I wanted to focus with Javon because he is socially aware on quality relationships. And so what we did was we started doing something called Gentlemen in Training dates. And we used to do them once a month. Now they're not as often, but it's where we would go out together, but he would do everything. I'd tell him what I wanted. He'd order my food at the restaurant. He would be the one to talk directly with the server. He'd open the door for me. And he got to the point where he really looked forward to those interactions. And you could see his mannerisms switch up. Like I was no longer mom, and he wanted to talk about video games and things that interest him. He'd ask how my day was, and he really got into it. And I was able to really see the remnants of that one day. I was coming into the building, and I have a very alpha personality, and he picked up, and he definitely has that. He got that from me. So I've always been concerned about him being too forward more than the opposite. It was one of the things that I worried about like pre-adolescence, because I had heard so much about autistic boys being overly sexual. And I was so concerned because I was like, oh my, I don't know how I'm gonna navigate that. And he just walked up to the girl and he was like, oh, nice phone. And he's like, what are you watching? And he asked if she's watching a YouTube video. He said, oh, I've seen that video. That's one of my favorites. And like literally started this conversation with her like a pro.
Great.
And so I realized right then that I really was doing the right thing. And because I knew his father, that's almost 6'4", I knew he would be a tall presence. And the added layer is he's Black. So I wanted to make sure that he always knew to be respectful and be aware and make sure that whatever he's doing, the other person is comfortable with.
We know how helpful role playing is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're role playing, appropriate behavior, and it sounds like and healthy behavior, and that's what you were doing on those mock dates.
So now he has a really good friend, and he says she's not his girlfriend. And also, so my daughter was a little concerned because she's a few years younger than him, and with him being so close to 18, Samaya was like, Mom, I just don't want anything inappropriate to happen, and then it looks some kind of way, but it seems to be pretty platonic. But they spend a lot of time together now, and her mother has 2 autistic children, the youngest one being lower functioning, so she doesn't leave the house very often. So when I do activities, I do it with those 2. And he takes very, very good care of her. He makes sure that we just had her birthday, we took her out for her birthday, that sort of thing. So I'm going to be honest, there's a part of me that's hoping that it just kind of sticks, you know what I mean? And that this is it, and that I don't have to worry about the added level of him meeting someone. I really am kind of lightweight playing matchmaker here.
Well, there's actually lots of thoughts were popping into my mind as we talked about like when to know it's okay to give your mom stamp of approval. And because unfortunately, yet fortunately, they do need help and guidance with kind of understanding that. And what I start thinking about is the healthy relationships and really trying to observe from the outside, like, is this really a healthy relationship, and getting to that point first. I think for Aiden, I really realized that his relationship that's now led to engagement, and they're living together. So they're living together and they're engaged, they're not married, but that's a whole nother, like, everybody's gonna have a different opinion with this one. But I really knew that this was somebody that Aiden was interested in because I didn't have to initiate conversation about Maggie. I didn't have to say, you know, so how did it go when you talked on, or when you FaceTimed, or when you went over to her apartment without adult supervision? Like, what did you, I didn't have to do that. He was instead bringing her up in conversation and initiating conversations about her with me. And Aiden and I really, we communicate very, very well. He doesn't tell me everything. He doesn't tell me things that he thinks he might get in trouble for, but because he knows that I'm supportive of a healthy relationship, he would initiate those conversations. And I'll never forget when we were driving to a floor hockey or poly hockey, Special Olympics poly hockey practice. And out of the blue, he said, "Mom, I think Maggie's the one. I think she's the one." And that's when I knew that, you know, with all of these different times of him bringing her up, I knew that this was somebody that they have a healthy relationship. They've got things to work on. But that's when I knew that it was time to start really seeking out expert help. You know, that's when I really knew, okay, I'm his mom, and there's topics that he's not really going to want to talk to me about. And direct instruction is so important that I feel, I mean, direct instruction can be verbal, you know, just talking it through, not like direct instruction, but that's when I knew it. And he's had a number of previous relationships, but none have had this element. Kind of like, I mean, if you've ever been married or, you know, felt somebody that you were very closely connected with and maybe didn't get married, doesn't really matter. But it's the same feelings for him as it was as feelings for me, or at least how I can reflect upon my experience so there's just a healthiness about it, and a love and respect for each other, and so that's how I knew.
And then of course communication with the other family.
Oh yeah,
right, lots of communication.
A lot of communication, and that adds a whole nother element. There was Maggie's mom is a very good communicator and an extremely involved mom. And because we do align very well with our thoughts about our young adults and their independence and their abilities, and you know, that is not just helpful, like I don't even know the right word, it's just made this whole experience for Aiden so positive.
Now, the issue that we have in our home is that he is developing these online relationships through these video games. And I don't know these people. And I do know he confides in my daughter. It hasn't always been healthy. And a couple times he's considered them to be girlfriends. And that's been really difficult for me to navigate because electronics is a trigger for our household in general.
Let's bring Mary into the conversation. So Mary's daughter is Emily. She just turned 15.
Well, hello everyone, and thanks for having me. Yes, my daughter gets mad at me all the time because we talk about sexuality. But I'm gonna keep talking about it until she just accepts that I'm gonna keep talking about it. She is going into 10th grade. She has autism. She also has developmental delay. My concern has been, I have watched some of the neurotypical young men show interest, and she doesn't understand. And the things they text. She clearly doesn't understand what they're talking about. And I'm worried about her safety. I'm worried about if I let her go to, let's say, there's a couple girls who she does, two of them, that she interacts with their sisters, and they're neurotypical. But if she went to their house, let's say for a birthday party and there was boys, what would the safety be like?
It was making me think of, I was able to sit in on the panel last week with the self-advocates, and what a couple big takeaways I heard was, well, the two main things are to make sure parents understand that people of all abilities want to have relationships. And obviously the people on this phone call know that because we're all talking about it. But for those listening, to make sure we're really understanding that all people want to have relationships. Most people want to have some kind of intimacy. It doesn't have to be sexual, as we've talked about earlier with Katie, but then to also talk so much about relationships and to help make sure that their children understand kind of the beginning of what's just maybe an unhappy relationship, maybe not the best fit, all the way to abuse and, you know, emotional abuse, mental abuse, of course, physical and sexual abuse too. But to really role play and talk with your young adult about these issues and to help them figure out how to end a relationship if it's not the right fit or if there is any abuse.
I just wanted to mention to Mary, I mean, if I were in your shoes, I would make sure that my daughter is accompanied when she's in social situations with boys. And I would definitely want to know the families of the boys she's with so that you can be sort of a silent shepherd behind, because, you know, you don't really want her to be in something inappropriate that she can't manage. But I think there are enough parents of boys who are used to that. At least the boys with special needs. Now, if you're with typically functioning, that's probably different. But I think also their parents would need to step in as well.
There's definitely things he doesn't want to touch on with me. And my friend has a son who's the same age as Javon, and he's neurotypical, and him and Javon are very close. And so if Javon wants to do something that he wouldn't like me to go with him, sometimes we'll see if Juice will take him. And he does message Juice and say, you know, oh, you know, I had a spat with somebody online, something like that. So I think if our kids are engaging with neurotypical kids, I think it's hugely important to possibly get them some kind of support from another peer that's also neurotypical.
Aiden and I have been very fortunate to have a young lady they met in elementary school. And so they've been friends ever since. They didn't go to the same high school. So after high school, they reconnected. And this young lady is somebody that Aiden will completely confide in. And she also has his interest at heart. So when they just started hanging out, I said, well, you know, actually you could provide some supports that could actually be paid for. So there is that incentive. I think that she would still communicate with him if not, but she's been essential in some of those online relationships that we are hearing about, you know, because he doesn't always believe me. I'm just mom. So having those other supports is invaluable.
I think one thing that really struck me, and I've always thought this, many of the people on this call do this informally, but parent support groups would be really cool to have a relationship focused parent support group, or sexuality focus, all these things, because we are so orchestrating our children's social lives and their intimacy and all. I mean, everything for my son, I orchestrate absolutely everything. Him stepping out our front door, I have to help him step out the front door. So to help figure this out for all of us, that would be really cool if we could, you know, do more things like that. That'd be a really cool thing for Mad Hatter Wellness to be doing. I think all of our kids, neurotypical and those with different disabilities, all need to be taught a lot about consent and relationships. And if we just keep talking about boundaries and consent and relationships, I mean, I think a lot of things will flow naturally, and just keep talking about it. You know, that's even in our home with my other two children, I feel like we're trying to set boundaries about privacy, and we're doing that with all three of the kids, and we're going in the right direction with that, and it's not easy, and I know I'm making mistakes every day, but I think we're going in the right direction with it all. So just keep talking about it and keep trying, and if you goof up one day, just try again the next day. It's okay.
It's such an ongoing journey, you know. I think just remembering that I try to, like you said, give myself grace and know that I don't need to have all the answers. And I have lots of conversations. I am slowly but surely building a community where we just kind of support each other, because I really think the answers that we need for our children are more in each other as parents than it is in professionals, because all kids need something different, and we can take those ideas, so it's a combination of it all. We just kind of keep plunging away. And for me, the chosen path has been to kind of handle it the same way I did with my daughter, except with a little more hand-holding.
I found your organization a great partner for me in having a resource. It's been nice because I was looking a long time for a counselor, someone to talk to him, and I couldn't find anyone.
I really do hope maybe we could find a way and try to do some local support groups around this. I feel like usually when you go to a support group, it's just about behavioral challenges and stuff, and nobody wants to talk about this kind of stuff. And I don't see this as a negative. It's, you know, this is something that I really hope for my daughter. I really hope that she finds somebody that she can have this kind of connection, intimate connection with at some point in her life. Part of me says it. The other part of me is like, you gross, please don't. But
Right.
but I do. In the long run, I really do, because I want her to feel loved. I want her to feel loved in that way. I mean, I want her to feel loved in many ways, but I want her to be able to feel physically what that is like if and when she's ready someday.
Very recently, with an amazing partner, started an LLC called Parenting Beyond Abilities. And our goal is to support parents through advocacy for their families and their children with just a specialty in the cultural lens.
Mhm.
So just making sure that Black families and African families and things like that have a voice at the table.
Bianca, earlier in this conversation, you had talked about how that it was really just always part of your life and part of the daily conversations, weekly, because it's not something like you turn the page and all of a sudden there's sexuality knocking at the door. And I think early on in children's life, like that thought of boundaries and really teaching those healthy boundaries is something that spans across the ages. So the sexuality education isn't just about having sex. That's just where I am in my life right now, like worrying about that piece, but there's been so many parts that have gone before. And as far as resources go, Bianca, I think it was you also that asked or said something about resources for adults to get together.
Mm-hmm.
In the world of Down syndrome, we have this wonderful organization called the Minnesota Down Syndrome Association of Minnesota, and they host some events, which is actually where Aiden and Maggie met. Was a co-sponsored Gigi's Playhouse and DSAM event. But there's also area places for people to get together, like local communities typically have things like Highland Friendship Club, I think is in St. Paul. Project Explore does a lot out here where we live. So they have like those dances that still have the supervision, and they can actually have PCAs that go with them. But so there's lots of resources for like, well, not everybody has the same. I feel very lucky that in our community, we have a ton of options when we're not in a pandemic. But another resource that I found really helpful, the Circles curriculum was like what I heard of first in teaching those boundaries. And then Katie, the Mad Hatter Wellness curriculum, just really, I usually teach one and then the other because it's super concrete and a lot of repetition for the Circles curriculum. And then it just complements, I think, the learning that is a little more direct and just a little more specialized from the Mad Hatter Wellness, from Sexuality for All Abilities. But also Terry Cohenhoven, I was able to go to see her present several times now because of national conferences, but also the local Down syndrome organization has brought her in to speak. And Aiden participated in his public school sex education classes.
Nice.
I was not afraid in elementary school to say, what? You're even asking me if Aiden should participate? Of course he should participate. He needs the information. Maybe he only absorbs and understands a portion of that, but it's still a base, it's still a foundation, it's still a building block to then have places like Mad Hatter Wellness, like Sexuality for All Abilities curriculum come in and really bring it to the level where they're understanding.
Thank you again, everyone, for listening in celebration of the book, Sexuality for All Abilities. Woohoo! So
Thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited.
Yes, congrats. Thank you. We look forward to having it.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, everyone. See you later. Have a great day.
You guys have a
Thank
good night.
you. Nice talking to everyone.